Symptoms of ADHD include difficulty focusing, staying organized, and staying still. So why do so many people who have it choose to be dungeon masters? A role where you sit at a table for hours on end, playing out complex scenarios with a textbook worth of rules in a world that only exists in your imagination. Hey friends, my name is Ginny D and I have ADHD, and yes, I am a dungeon master. It can seem contradictory, but actually for a lot of people with ADHD, running games can be easier than playing in them. The ADHD mind craves stimulation, and as a game master, you are constantly engaged, because you're not just playing one character, who may or may not be actively involved in what's happening, you're playing the whole world. But no matter how fun and rewarding DMing might be for someone with ADHD, the role also comes with some challenges. Honestly, navigating all these obstacles and still running a great game is kind of like magic. Oh my god, we're doing magic. Are we wizards? Wait, let me try something. I have been preparing for this moment my entire life. Okay, so we're wizards. Coping with ADHD isn't a skill we were born with, but we've been practicing and learning it. And there are yet more powerful coping strategies that we haven't unlocked yet. Kind of like spells. Let's see. Aha, here we go. The Dungeon Master's ADHD Grimoire. There are 4 spells in this book that are essential for running games. Maybe they're new to you, or maybe you already know them, but I could help you learn to cast them at a higher level. But before we start dabbling in these mysterious arts, I have to warn you about something. This is an unpredictable sort of magic. Everyone's experience with ADHD is different. We all face different obstacles, and something that helps one DM might not be helpful to another. This video, contrary to how it may appear, is not magic and can't solve every problem for every person. I'm just here to share some ideas and help you explore new strategies that could make DMing easier. Great! With that out of the way, let's get to casting. Our first spell is Power Word Prep. Preparing for game sessions can be tough for DMs with ADHD because we often struggle with something called executive function. Executive function refers to the skills that let us take goal-directed action, basically every step between setting a goal and reaching it. That includes identifying the steps needed to complete a task, remembering those steps in order, guessing at how long they'll take, and staying on task to actually complete them. That's why DMs with ADHD might sit in front of an empty page for hours and still not get anything done, or try to read the module but understand it about as much as you understand Ancient Draconic. On the flip side, we might end up hyper-focusing or getting completely absorbed in one specific task. This might sound counterintuitive because there's a misconception that ADHD makes it difficult to focus. In reality, ADHD makes it difficult to regulate our focus, so sometimes we can't focus and other times we can't stop. This means maybe the session starts in 1 hour and we haven't prepped any of the encounters for today, but we do know the last 300 years of political history for this region, complete with a meticulous timeline of events. Or we learned how to play the ukulele. So, how do we cast a magic spell to fix this? Well, every wizard knows that spells have components, and Power Word Prep has 3. The first component is thinking big picture. This doesn't just apply to individual session prep, it's also about your campaign overall. What kind of game will be easiest for you to run? This might mean setting your game in a fictional world that you already know a lot about, or in a limited area like a single city. It might mean planning to run games every 2 weeks instead of every week. Maybe it means running a pre-written adventure, so you can change stuff and add homebrew when you feel like it, but on weeks when you have low motivation, you can just fall back on the module. Some DMs with ADHD find that they lose interest when running a long campaign with one central plot arc. For those DMs, running shorter campaigns or more episodic campaigns allows you to change up the setting and theme when you feel the urge to try something new. The next component is a system. Research has shown that having a clear, predetermined plan or routine is a crucial coping strategy for people with ADHD. Things we may normally struggle with, like remembering everything that we're supposed to be doing and prioritizing those things appropriately, can be outsourced to a system. For example, maybe you write down a checklist of all the things you need to have prepared before a session, in order of importance. Maybe the most important thing for you is knowing what stat blocks you'll be using in your combat encounters. Now, when you start prepping, you know to begin with combat encounters, instead of spending 2 hours writing some extremely interesting NPCs and then realizing that you aren't prepared for the game. Systems might also include alarms and timers to keep you from losing track of time. Maybe you set a recurring calendar reminder to prep the day before your session. Maybe you track how long it takes you to prepare for a session, so that you have a better idea in the future of how much time to set aside. There's no one system that works for everyone, and your prep might not necessarily necessarily look like another DM's prep. I am a verbal processor, so I get a lot more done by talking through my session plans with a friend than by writing it down. If reading is a struggle for you, use a PDF reader and listen to it instead. It's important to remember that whatever style of prep works for you, that's the correct one. Of course, no matter how good your systems and your intentions, sometimes you'll just have weeks where you're not ready. And that's natural. We may be wizards, but we're not gods. We can't be perfect all the time. That's why the final component of Power Word Prep is a backup plan. Your backup plan might be that you play board games instead, or skip a week, or even reschedule. Sometimes, if I'm good to run a session, but I'm just not prepared for whatever's coming up in the main campaign, I'll run a one-shot, either as a side quest within the campaign or something completely separate. I really like Grant Howitt's one-page games for this because I can run something like Goat Crashers or The Witch is Dead without preparing anything in advance. Maybe one of your players would be interested in running a one-shot. But whatever your backup plan is, it's important to discuss it with your group so they know what to expect. If players are expecting D&D, it might be frustrating to get a surprise board game night or a last-minute cancellation. Communication helps keep everybody on the same page. Congratulations, you can now add Power Word Prep to your spellbook. In a minute, 3 more spells to help you run your games. But first, somebody's gotta keep the lights on in this wizard tower. It's time for today's sponsor. Okay, babe, just like we rehearsed.
Hello, I am today's sponsor. You should subscribe to Ginny's Patreon because I love it, and there's absolutely no conflict of interest here.
Tell them about the perks.
Starting at just $2, you can join patron-exclusive live streams, and
the Discord.
And the Discord. You can get on the private Discord. I'm on there of my own free will.
Okay, now the PDFs.
Yeah. There's PDF downloads every month. Magic items, NPCs, monsters for 5th edition games, and I think that's it. Can I go now?
Oh crap, you were wearing your wedding ring the whole time. Give it to me, we gotta go again. Now we can look at spells to use during sessions. For example, we prepared all this information, and wait a second, where did I just put those notes? You saw them, right? I just had them. Crap. Well, at least there's a spell for this. It's called Prestidigitaking Notes. Notes can be a minefield for someone with ADHD. It's common to write something down so that we don't forget it, but then forget where exactly we wrote it down. You might take some notes in a notebook, some on the Notes app on your phone, and yet more on a nearby scrap of paper. And what are the chances of finding all of those notes later when you need them? Plus, tons of DMs and players alike have told me that they struggle with being able to take notes effectively while listening or talking, which can make it especially hard to do during sessions. But if we don't take notes, it's very likely that we'll forget important information. One meta-analysis of more than 80 studies found that while ADHD does not impair long-term memory, it can impair our ability to turn short-term memories into long-term memories. So if our brains are libraries, we don't usually have trouble finding books there, but sometimes we forget to put new books onto the shelves in the first place. Now, before we cast this spell, we need to choose a target. This is very important. Make a decision right now about the one place you will keep your notes. Is it Google Drive? Is it a paper notebook? Is it the Notes app or Evernote or World Anvil or Notion or Microsoft Word? Is it recording sessions and jotting down timestamps to make it easy to listen back? Whatever it is, pick one and then speak these words of power. From this day forward, I shall keep my notes in this hallowed place and no other. If you ever notice yourself taking notes in any place other than the one you just designated, catch yourself and redirect. This designated note-taking space does not need to be perfect or neat or comprehensible to anyone but you. I would recommend something you can access online just so you can't forget it at home, and ideally something searchable, but that's really up to you. The point is, if you can't consolidate your notes in one place, then everything else I'm about to suggest will be meaningless. When you need to find information, you should know exactly where to go. Once you've chosen the target for this spell, how you use it is completely up to you. I'm one of those obsessive weirdos who has my notes split into folders with color coding and spreadsheets, but you might get just as much value out of one long Word document with a few bullet points per session. Whatever system you choose, it should make note-taking easier, not harder. One thing that has really helped me is taking notes or reviewing notes right after a session, the next day at the latest. Anything I missed writing down during the session is still floating around in my head, so I can fill in the gaps right now with information that I will definitely have forgotten by the time the next session rolls around. But also, worst case scenario, you forget stuff. If you don't remember and your players don't remember, maybe it just wasn't that important. Fun fact about this spell, lots of different classes can cast it, even players. If session notes are especially challenging for you, see if any of your players are willing to take on the job and share the notes that they take, with you and even with the rest of the party. You can give them a fancy title like Official Archivist or Party Scribe. Some DMs offer inspiration to players who do session recaps. It's nice to make sure a player feels appreciated if they're taking on an extra job. Now that we've mastered Prestidigitaking Notes, or at least outsourced it, we're ready to tackle the next one, Divine Focus. Even for people without ADHD, there's a lot to keep track of as a dungeon master. Not only do you need a strong understanding of the rules, which are detailed enough to fill a textbook, but there's also a lot of miscellaneous information to keep tabs on while you play. Who's up next in initiative? Was there a specific piece of information that players were supposed to receive in this location? Would anyone's passive insight be high enough to notice that this NPC is lying? Does this monster have a reaction that can be used here? Studies have shown that people with ADHD have trouble with working memory. That refers to the information that you have to hold in your mind while completing tasks. So if you've ever walked into another room to get something and then immediately forgot what you came for, that's your working memory falling short. DMing is a task that puts a huge strain on your working memory. That's why the first component of this particular spell is all about outsourcing some of that working memory. This is known as cognitive offloading, and you already do it all the time. When you write an event down on a calendar, your brain doesn't have to hold on to that information anymore because the calendar is holding it for you. In the same way, we can use tools to offload some of the cognitive demands of DMing. For example, using an initiative tracker means you don't have to memorize initiative order. Using condition markers means you don't have to remember which monster is hexed or which player character is grappled. And these examples are common even at neurotypical tables, but you can stretch this strategy way further. Have trouble remembering which minion is which? Use numbered scraps of paper instead of minis, or put the minis on top of colorful poker chips to differentiate them. Don't want to forget to give players a certain clue this session? Write clue in huge letters on a sticky note and put it in the middle of the DM screen, and don't take it down until they've found it. There are tons of digital tools for this stuff too. If you play online, many VTTs have features for tracking things like initiative and status conditions. D&D Beyond has an encounter tool that tracks initiative order and hit points and lets you easily click through different stat blocks. The more information you can offload, the easier it'll be to focus on what's left. Our next component is simplification. You can use all the tools in the world, but sometimes the stuff you're keeping track of is just too complicated. Not even the best encounter tracker is going to make it easy to run a boss monster with a half-dozen minions, legendary resistances, lair actions, and environmental effects all at the same time. And for some DMs, even less complex combat than that is still difficult to stay on top of. Thankfully, there are plenty of ways to simplify D&D mechanics, and a lot of them won't even be visible to your players. For example, these days I pretty much always just use average damage for groups of simple enemies instead of rolling damage. Now, don't get me wrong, it's fun to roll dice, but when you have 5 minions with multi-attack, you're already rolling 10 times just to see if you hit. Likewise, as your baddies go up in challenge ratings, so will the number of things they can do. It's okay to skim a spellcasting villain's stat block beforehand and highlight just 2 or 3 spells that you think you'll actually use. You can even just choose monsters that have simpler stat blocks, or edit stat blocks to simplify them. There's no shame in that. If it's hard for you to make tactical decisions mid-combat, you can simplify that stuff too. Maybe you decide beforehand that when this monster reaches 30 hit points, it tries to run. Or you decide that once 2 of the creatures are dead, the remaining creatures call for reinforcements. You can absolutely set conditions like that in advance so that you don't have to be making on-the-fly strategic choices in the middle of a fight. The final component is just cutting yourself some slack. You have a chronic condition that makes it extra hard to be a dungeon master. It's honestly incredible that you're even doing it. Take frequent breaks, let your players know when you're struggling, and don't shame yourself for needing to look things up or make corrections. I promise you, you don't need to have all the rules memorized. Even highly experienced DMs have to look stuff up. If you're not sure about how to rule something, you can take a second to Google it, or just make a call that feels right and double check it later if you want. This is actually why I love having other DMs as players, because then I can just say, how does holding your breath work again? And one of us will probably know it. One of the most game-changing realizations for me was when I learned that I could just press pause on the game anytime and take a second to collect my thoughts or do some research. One time, my players decided to try and talk their way out of a problem that I had definitely assumed they would solve with combat. I realized I had no idea how this character would respond to being persuaded, so I called for a 10-minute break. I went into the other room, I reviewed the character's goals, I set some DCs for persuasion, deception, and intimidation checks, and when we reconvened, I felt totally prepared for the situation. You can even end the whole session early if you feel unprepared to respond to surprising player choices, or if the party moves through your material faster than you expected. You should now have Power Word Prep, Prestidigitaking Notes, and Divine Focus in your spellbook. Hopefully you still have a little parchment left, because there is one more spell all Dungeon Masters with all wizards need to know. Here it is, Speak with Friends. When we talk about symptoms of ADHD, we're usually talking about hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattention. But there's another, less recognized symptom that researchers are starting to realize is a core feature of ADHD. It's called emotional dysregulation, and it basically just means that we sometimes have trouble controlling our emotions and might react disproportionately. And here's the thing about D&D, it might seem like it's a game about swords and castles and dragons, but at its heart, all tabletop games are social games. Judging by what I see in tabletop communities online, games are way more likely to end over social conflict than over pretty much anything else. And as the Dungeon Master, you're in a unique position that puts you under more social pressure. You're the guide, leading players through a game that is supposed to be fun for them. I don't know about you, but that makes me very anxious. Doesn't it make you anxious? I want to run a great game that my players love. I want my bad guys to be scary. I want my friendly NPCs to be lovable. I want combat to be challenging enough to be exciting, but not so impossible that they can't win. I want my players to laugh at my jokes and gasp at my surprises. And of course, if something isn't working for my players, I want to know about it so I can fix it. Unfortunately, emotional dysregulation can make it very difficult to receive feedback. It's easy for people who experience this symptom to take criticism very personally, and maybe even react so poorly to receiving it that they unintentionally teach players not to speak up when something isn't working. And even though criticism can be hard to hear, it's absolutely essential for making sure that everyone is enjoying the game, and allowing us to become better dungeon masters. Thankfully, we can do magic. In this case, the magic of systematizing feedback. There are plenty of different systems that you can use for feedback. One DM told me that they use an anonymous form, so players feel comfortable being critical, and even if the DM feels upset, they can't attach that emotion to a specific player. Some DMs like to have occasional get-togethers where they don't play at all, but just discuss how the game's been going and anything that they'd like to see changed, kind of like recurring session zeros. Personally, my favorite feedback system is called Stars and Wishes. In this system, after a session, you go around the whole table and everyone gives one star, or something they enjoyed from the session, and one wish, or something they'd like to see in a future session. This has been a really useful way for me to get feedback, because even when a wish contains a criticism, it's phrased in a forward-looking way. Instead of focusing on the problem, saying, "I didn't like this part of the game," it focuses on the solution. A great example is when a player told me that their wish was to have more space to roleplay with their fellow players. This helped me realize something about myself. I was so scared that players would get bored that I was rushing from scene to scene and encounter to encounter, trying to fill space. But in doing that, I took away my player's ability to choose to fill that space. If that player had said, "Ginny, just so you know, you talk way too much," that would have really hurt my feelings. I've always been talkative and I've gotten my fair share of flack for it. But by focusing the feedback not on my mistakes, but on the player's wishes, it made it a lot easier to hear that criticism. Also, since Stars and Wishes takes place at the end of the session, I have plenty of space to think about and process that feedback before the next session. This is really important because a lot of times my gut reaction will be defensive, but once I take the time to sit with what my players have said, I can calm down and respond to it more rationally. And Speak with Friends isn't just about feedback, it's also about asking for support. Remember, no wizard adventures alone. We're way too squishy for that. You're a member of a party, and it's okay to ask your fellow party members for help. Everybody is at the table to have fun playing D&D, you included. If you tell your players about an obstacle you're facing, they might have ideas for how to help, or how to make it easier, or how to avoid it completely. If something about the game is hard for you, you don't have to shoulder it alone. Man, I thought a wizard tower would be awesome, but this place absolutely reeks of bat guano. I'm gonna go. Whew. Much better. You know, whenever I talk about ADHD, people tell me that you don't have to have ADHD to experience these kinds of struggles or to benefit from this advice. And that's true. Anyone can have trouble with prep or note-taking or focus or communication. But people with ADHD experience these kinds of problems chronically, to the point where it's disruptive to our lives. So yeah, these tips could be useful for any dungeon master. But I didn't make this video for any dungeon master. I made it for my fellow wizards. You deserve to run games if you want to. You deserve to have a great time and feel comfortable in your role as dungeon master. It's okay that DMing might look different for you than it does for neurotypical DMs. There is nothing wrong with you, except for having like ridiculously few hit points. That's pretty bad. Make sure to check out my video with tips for D&D players with ADHD if you haven't seen it already, because honestly, there's a lot of crossover there. Plenty of my tips for players also apply to DMs. Plus, in my experience, neurodivergent people tend to find each other, so chances are some of your players probably have ADHD too, and might really benefit from the stuff in that video.